It should be noted that Pillmore in particular took this discipline from Wesley through Asbury in America particularly hard, and we indicated that in his own manuscript diary, which we have, he indicated that he would show old Daddy Wesley back in America just how good an itinerant he was. And we had indicated last time that he set out on really a historic one-year southern mission, which was greatly effective in consolidating and starting classes, particularly the Baltimore area. We can see here Pillmore was also able to keep the Petersburg, Norfolk area societies moving and all the way down to Charleston and Savannah and back. His diary makes for thrilling reading and really reminds us again of Pillmore's evangelical spirit. His legacies are multiple, despite the fact that he ultimately was not given an appointment in 1773 and returns back in 1774 to Britain to continue the itinerancy. But nevertheless, he left behind Methodism as better connected in the Philadelphia area. He was able to consolidate the work, particularly in Philadelphia. You can see here the historic St. George's, the old building there, which was his loving congregation that he loved. And he was able to arrive in 1769 shortly after Thomas Webb had found other Methodists not too far away, worshiping in a small society with converts that had been shaped by George Whitfield's preaching as far back as 1739, there in Loxley Place, meeting at a pub there. Captain Thomas Webb had been able to find these lost Methodists, an early society that most scholars believe at least had one member, Edward Evans, as a convert from Whitfield. So Pillmore was able to really consolidate the work at St. George's. He was able also to, like Boardman, work with the growing number of blacks and meeting in society there. He wrote in his own letter in 1771, he says here, he gives a report back to his back to the British Methodists. A few days ago, he says here, the Lord has greatly blessed us both, Boardman and myself, in New York and Philadelphia. Our congregations are very large, and very serious trifling seems to have no place at present. For sinners are engaged about the vast important affairs of the invisible world. Even the poor Negroes are turning back to God and seeking to wash their robes and make them white in the blood of the Lamb. He goes on to say, he gives an account also that the Lord was pleased to manifest his love to a poor black a few days ago. And her mistress had persecuted her very much because she came to the Methodist Church. But she thought it was better to be beaten for hearing the word of God here than to burn in hell for all eternity. He says, we have about 20 black women that meet in one class, and I think upon the whole they are happy as any one class we have. Pillmore's manuscript diary gives great accounts of Methodism's expansion among African Americans. He also was able to meet some unofficial missionaries that came over from Britain, Robert Williams and John King, and meet with them in Philadelphia and ratify that they too had preaching gifts in sort of a way of ratifying immigrants coming over without being sent from John Wesley. And so Pillmore is also remembered for appointing the first woman as a class leader in St. George's there, Mary Thorne Parker. and we have her writings as well on how challenging it was to be a class leader in this early period. Pillmore left Methodism more closely linked to the other denominations, particularly in Philadelphia, which shows that Methodism was, again, a stimulating movement alongside other movements. His own thoughts were written down on the purpose and design of Methodism, one of the early mission statements of Methodism. Pillmore writes on December 3rd, 1769, that the Methodist Society was never to be looked upon as, it was never designed to make a separation from the Church of England or be looked upon as a church, still the renewal movement aspect, and that it was at first and is still intended for the benefit of all those of every denomination who, being truly convinced of sin and the danger they are exposed to, earnestly desire to flee the wrath to come. Pillmore returned to Britain. Wesley's views of him had not changed, that he was not committed to the itinerancy as much as to the learned ministry. And although he preached for a number of years in Britain, he finally re-immigrated back to America and was ordained as an Episcopal priest in Connecticut in 1785. So he becomes a leading Episcopal figure in America and always worked with the Methodists closely, even offering them financial support. Even though Asbury and he had locked horns later in life, they worked together at least yearly. Pillmore would come to the old St. George's and give a love offering and hear Asbury preach. Pillmore dies in 1825, a good few years after Asbury. But Pillmore left prayer meetings and Sunday schools and a real legacy in both the Episcopal Church and in early Methodism. So we see that the early American missionaries sent by Wesley are caught between the needs of emerging colonial America and the needs of an indigenizing, contextualizing American Methodist movement, and Wesley's need to bring more order and itinerant control, and even, dare say, liturgical and doctrinal control. So we see not all is harmony in the earliest missionary days, as is true with any missionary movement. Personalities enter into it. Wesley sends Asbury in 1771, and then 2 years later feels that Asbury himself is not sufficient to the disciplinary task, and sends two more of his missionaries. First, the Scottish Thomas Rankin, who becomes Wesley's hatchet man, to come in and bring order. He becomes the general superintendent, or Wesley's helper, in 1773, and begins the long-enduring Methodist trait of keeping statistics on membership and money from 1773. So he calls together in 1773 the first annual conference to be held in America, in Philadelphia. And he and this man here, George Shadford, who were as different as night and day, really begin to put their stamp on American Methodism. George Shadford was a charismatic personality, greatly loved by all. Even George Whitefield and John Wesley thought he was the most winsome character, and actually John Wesley, at his commissioning to be sent to America, said, "I let you loose, George Shadford, upon the great continent of America. Publish in the sunshine the good news of Jesus Christ." This commissioning has been often used in Methodist mission commissioning ceremonies even up until the present days, and was spoken over yours truly at my commissioning to go to Liberia. I was commissioned, "I let you loose, Bill Daniel and family, upon the great continent of Africa to publish the good news in the sunshine of Jesus Christ." So Shadford was quite popular. Thomas Rankin was not. There was tension between he and Asbury. And at this first annual conference, appointments are made and statistics kept, and we've been doing that ever since. This map in your book shows the areas that Wesley's commissioned missionaries, again laypersons, served by letters attached to their names. We've already looked at Boardman and Pillmore, who have become marginalized and even have returned now to Britain. Robert Williams arrives and works first in New York City, working under Boardman, but then, as you can see, works southward and ultimately works with George Shadford in the Brunswick area, creating a revival of sorts, a real statistical revival, which you can see here. George Shadford and Thomas Rankin's major areas of ministry are detailed here. Thomas Rankin staying mostly in the New York area. In fact, the first conference minutes we have of 1773 list him as the New York area appointment, and changes would be held every 4 months according to this first conference. And we have these minutes in the primary source document, the Methodist Experience in America, a source book, volume 1, and that's on page 56, held in 1773. Shadford, as we saw, was able to work in conjunction with Robert Williams. Robert Williams brought many unauthorized printings of Wesley's tracts and was censured in this first annual conference, where it says, "None of the preachers in America are to reprint Mr. Wesley's books without his authority. Robert Williams is to sell the books he's already printed, but to print no more under the above restrictions." So Wesley was really laying the law down against plagiarism and copyright infringement, which was difficult to enforce, even in these days of copyright contentions. The Methodist Church was already experiencing that as preachers were attempting to increase their salaries. But the Brunswick circuit with Shadford and Williams was quite effective. Another preacher, John King, worked in the Philadelphia and Baltimore area, and most scholars believe John King was the first to preach and to open up a mission area in Baltimore. And this is an engraving of his work that you could find there. John King preaching on the blacksmith shop at French and 4th Streets in Baltimore. So you can see there. This is the cast of characters. I call it Wesley's Ark, sent 2 by 2, not only to expand Methodism out into British Methodist Circuit number 50, according to John Wesley, which was the American colonies at the time. And these ministers sent by Wesley, the last group being John Dempster and Martin Rhoda, who worked in New York and Maryland, by the time they leave all leave in 1777 due to the rising tensions between colonial supporters of independence and royal loyalists to the crown, Methodism had societies throughout all the colonies, thanks to the work of Wesley's missionaries in Circuit 50. You can see the statistical data here. The work of the Brunswick Circuit in 1775 and 1776 through Shadford, who was a great beloved member of the conference, you can see really increased the numbers. The first annual conference numbers we have are 1,160, with most of those being in Maryland, and then New York, Philadelphia, New Jersey, and Virginia being all about equal in terms of members. You can see the number of circuits begin to go up, except here in 1777 when the preachers, British Wesleyan lay preachers, have all returned, and the American Revolution begins to has begun and begins to take its toll on American Methodism, which we will look at in the next segment.